In a busy garage in the heart of New York, a 20-year-old black mechanic is hard at work when a Hell's Angel, covered in tattoos and wearing a leather jacket, rushes in begging for urgent repairs so he can reach his injured daughter in the hospital. While the entire shop turns its back on the man, the young mechanic steps in to help and is fired by his manager. What he doesn't know? The biker is the CEO's brother, and what happens next will shock everyone. Before we dive into this story, let us know where you're watching from. We love to hear your thoughts. The morning rush in downtown Manhattan buzzed like a well-oiled machine. Cars jammed the street outside the auto garage on 54th and Lexington, horns blaring, construction humming from nearby buildings. Inside the garage, fluorescent lights flickered over rows of steel tool chests and cars hoisted mid-air. The air smelled of gasoline, old rubber, and burnt coffee. Mechanics moved lazily, laughing over crude jokes and sipping from oversized mugs as the day dragged forward. But not Malik. At just 20, Malik stood out, not only because of his youth, but because he worked like his life depended on it. He had deep brown skin, close-cropped hair, and arms defined from years of turning wrenches. He wore a grease-streaked navy blue jumpsuit with his name embroidered over the chest. Sweat clung to his temples even in the morning chill. While others chatted and checked their phones, Malik was on his back under a '22 Ford Explorer, fixing a bent axle without a word. People noticed him, but not the way he deserved. "Hey, someone tell Junior to grab my wrench. Chop chop, rookie," one of the senior techs barked, tossing a rag in Malik's direction. Another chimed in with a smirk. "Bet he's good with his hands. Comes from a long line of folks who did manual labor, if you know what I mean." Laughter erupted. No one flinched. Malik clenched his jaw, rolled out from under the vehicle, and walked to the tool wall in silence. This wasn't the first comment. It wouldn't be the last. Every day, subtle jabs about his skin, his age, where he was from. The manager didn't say much, unless Malik missed a deadline. Then he was right there, raising his voice, calling him kid in front of customers. Still, Malik kept going, not because he liked the treatment, but because he had no choice. His mom worked night shifts at a nearby hospital. Bills didn't pay themselves. He had dreams. Big ones. Maybe, one day, run his own garage, hire guys like himself. But dreams didn't mean much here. Not when you're young. Not when you're black. This garage ran on hierarchy, unspoken rules. And in that system, Malik was always at the bottom, not because he lacked skills. He was probably the sharpest tech in the shop, but every time he stepped up, someone stepped on him, and every time he spoke out, he got a warning. So Malik worked. Quietly, determinedly, watching, waiting. And he had no idea that today, the day that started like any other, was going to change everything. It was nearly 10:30 a.m. when the shop door creaked open again. The chime above it let out a weak ding, drowned by the buzz of an impact wrench in the back. No one turned to look, no one cared. But Malik noticed. From beneath the raised hood of a Dodge, he caught a glimpse. A large man stepping inside with heavy boots, a leather jacket worn thin at the elbows, and thick tattoos creeping up his neck like dark He looked out of place. Not because of his clothes, but because of the way he moved, fast but careful, like a man searching for something or trying not to break. The man's face was flushed, his eyes darting across the room, scanning every mechanic, every desk. His breathing was fast and shallow, but not angry, more like panicked. The word Hell's Angel stitched in red and white across the back of his jacket drew quiet, judging glances from the corner of the room. A few customers near the waiting area shifted uncomfortably. One of them, a man in a suit holding a coffee, leaned to his wife and whispered, "Jesus, what's he doing here?" The biker stepped up to the counter and spoke, quick, breathless. "Car died just outside. I need help. My daughter, she had an accident. She's in the ER uptown. I need to get there, fast." His voice cracked, not with aggression, but desperation. "Please, just need a jump or a fix, whatever gets me out of here." The receptionist, a woman named Kim, with nails long enough to tap her phone while she typed, didn't even lift her eyes. "Take a seat," she said flatly. "Someone will get to you, but I really don't have time to wait." "Sir, everyone here's got somewhere to be," she snapped back. Behind him, two guys in line rolled their eyes. "Should have called an Uber," one muttered. Another customer actually stood and started walking toward the door. "I don't feel safe with that guy around. Look at him, tatted up, pacing like a maniac." The biker turned slightly, as if realizing for the first time he wasn't just being ignored. He was being rejected. Labeled. A threat. He stepped away from the counter, rubbing his hand over his face, glancing back toward the street like he was deciding whether to run or shout or cry. He took a step toward the door, defeated, fishing his phone from his pocket to call a cab, when a voice cut through the hum of judgment. "Hey, wait up." The biker turned. Malik was standing beside the workbench, holding a bottle of water in one hand and wiping his hands on a rag with the other. "What kind of car?" Malik asked, calm, like it was just another job. "A Yamaha Cruiser. Something's off with the ignition, won't crank. I parked it right out front." "Cool. Mind if I take a look?" Malik walked toward him without waiting for an answer and offered the water. "You look like hell, man." The biker blinked, hesitated, then took the bottle. "Thanks, Yeah, my kid, she took a fall. Internal bleeding or something. The hospital's all the way across town." Malik crouched by the bike, eyes scanning quickly. "I can take a shot at it. Might be something simple. You got time to wait, like 10 minutes? 10 minutes I'll take," the man said, almost whispering. From behind them, a sarcastic voice rang out. "Look at Malik, playing captain, save a biker." Malik didn't turn. Didn't answer. He just reached into his toolbox, methodical, and got to work. But inside his heart thudded, not from fear, but from the weight of everything around him. He knew exactly what was happening. The glares, the whispers, the distance people kept. It was familiar, too familiar. He had lived it since he was old enough to be followed through a store, or asked if he really worked here. He wasn't helping this man because he pitied him. He was helping because he understood him. But while Malik worked, the tension thickened. The biker stayed near, watching. Even in his panic, he kept checking over his shoulder, wary of being asked to leave again. The other techs ignored them now, but the air was thick with judgment, like a fuse waiting to light. Then came the footsteps. Heavy, sharp. Ms. Karen, the shop manager. Late 40s, shaved head, and a permanent scowl like he was auditioning for a role in a bad cop show. He spotted the biker, then Malik, then the tools on the ground. "Ace?" "What the hell is this?" Malik stood, slowly, just helping him out. Quick fix. "I didn't ask for an essay, Malik. Who told you to work on that bike?" "No one. But the guy needs—" Reynolds stepped closer, his voice dropping. "Dangerous. He's not a customer. Not officially. You don't work on anything without a ticket, you know that." The biker spoke, hesitant. "I'll pay whatever. I'm not asking for free." Karen spun toward her. "I don't care if you're offering a blank check. This is a professional establishment. We don't do favors for people who walk in off the street looking like a threat." Malik blinked. That word, threat, like it was stamped on a forehead. He stepped forward, his voice low but solid. "He's not threatening anyone. He's trying to get to his daughter. If this were someone else—" "Enough." Karen pointed toward the door. "Back to your bay, now." The biker stepped back, ready to go. "Look, I didn't mean to cause trouble. I'll find another way." Malik didn't move. He looked at Karen, then at the people watching from the corners, the ones who wouldn't help, who wouldn't even offer a minute of their day. "You're really gonna let this man walk out when you've got 10 mechanics standing around sipping coffee?" "Malik, I've done double shifts, taken the worst jobs. You told me hard work would get me somewhere here, and the one time I helped someone without asking for anything, you're ready to throw me out?" Karen's eyes narrowed, his lip curled. "Pack your tools, you're done." Silence. Malik didn't argue. He just stared back, not with shock, but something colder. Acceptance. The biker looked down, muttered, "I'm sorry, kid." Malik shook his head. "Don't be. It's not your fault they don't see you, or me." The biker hesitated, then reached out his hand. Malik took it, a brief, solid grip, a shared understanding. And just like that, the man in the leather jacket walked out the door. Malik stood alone, in the center of a room full of people, yet somehow still invisible. The garage returned to its rhythm with an eerie ease after the biker left, like a rock had been dropped into a pond and the surface smoothed itself over too quickly. Malik stood motionless for a moment, the sting of the manager's words still raw in his ears. Around him, tools clinked and tires hissed with compressed air. No one said anything to him. No pats on the back, no defense, just silence, and the unspoken agreement that he had crossed a line by standing up for a man like that. He wiped his hands on his jumpsuit absently, walking back toward his workbench like a man who hadn't just been fired, but who still had things to finish. The tools were still laid out. The dodge he'd been working on still waited. and yet everything felt different now. The act was done. The choice had been made. From behind, one of the techs muttered just loud enough for Malik to hear. "All that for some dirtbag in a biker vest. Wasn't worth it, bro." Malik didn't answer. His hands were steady, but his chest burned, not with regret. No, that wasn't it. It was the knowing. The hard truth that it didn't matter how many hours he put in, how many busted axles he fixed, or how many times he smiled through gritted teeth. He would always be the first one out the door, always the easiest to blame. He had spent 2 years pretending that keeping his head down would earn him respect, but respect, he now realized, was never being offered. He heard the manager in the back office, his voice sharp and dismissive, probably on the phone with corporate or maybe bragging to a friend about how he handled the situation. Malik could see it all in his mind, the smirk, the self-satisfaction, the complete lack of understanding about what had really happened. He kept working, not out of stubbornness, but out of instinct. One bolt, then another. His hands moved on muscle memory, but his thoughts drifted. He pictured the biker on the sidewalk, fumbling for his phone, hoping a cab would come in time. He imagined the man's daughter, alone in a hospital bed, the minutes ticking by like hours. That man had walked into a room full of people and been treated like a problem. And for what? A jacket? Tattoos? The wrong kind of desperation? Malik had seen that look in other people's eyes before, the kind that said, "You're not one of us. You don't belong here." He had grown up watching his mom get talked over at grocery stores, watching teachers dismiss him without cause. Cops slow roll past him when he walked home late from work, and now, here it was again, but this time, someone else had been on the receiving end. Someone who, on paper, should have never had anything in common with Malik, and yet, they had everything in common in that moment. "Yo," Cam called from the desk. "You gonna stand there all day? Karen said you're out." Malik looked up, and for a second he wanted to say something. To challenge the system, to scream. But what would it change? These people had already made up their minds. So instead he nodded once calmly and returned to the back to grab his things. The locker room smelled like old sweat and rubber. Malik opened his locker slowly, the hinges squealing like they hadn't been greased in years. He tossed his gloves inside, unzipped his jumpsuit halfway, and took a long breath. He wasn't angry, not in the way they expected, not in a way that could be solved with shouting or fists. He felt something deeper, a clean kind of clarity, because in that moment, losing his job for helping someone, he finally felt like himself, like he'd done something that mattered, even if no one else could see it. As he pulled on his hoodie and started packing his tools, the door creaked open behind him. It was Jonas, one of the newer techs, barely a year in, barely spoke. "Hey," Jonas mumbled. "That was something back there." Malik gave him a look. Not sharp, just tired. "Yeah?" Jonas scratched at the back of his neck. "I mean, I don't know. That guy did look sketchy, but he was in a hurry. Seemed real. Most of the guys wouldn't even given him a second look. Just saying." Malik closed his toolbox with a click. "Yeah, that's the problem." He walked past Jonas without another word, his boots echoing down the hallway. Each step felt heavier, like he was carrying not just a bag of tools, but the weight of every time he'd been forced to swallow his pride. As he reached the main bay again, he paused. The shop floor was just as it had been, machines humming, men talking, oil streaking across the concrete, a world that had decided he didn't belong. Karen stood by the counter, clipboard in hand, pretending not to notice Malik, but her jaw was tight. His eyes flicked up just long enough to say, "Don't say anything more." Malik didn't. He simply walked to the front door, pushed it open, and stepped outside into the cold air. And there, standing at the edge of the curb, was the biker. He hadn't left. Malik blinked, surprised. "Thought you'd be at the hospital by now." The man nodded. "I was, just came back." He paused. "She's stable, got there in time, thanks to you." Malik looked at him, searching. "Why come back?" The biker's eyes were tired but clear. "Because I've been where you are. Because nobody should have to pay that kind of price for doing the right thing." Malik didn't know what to say, so he said nothing. The biker held out his hand again, firmer this time. Malik shook it. "Name's Ray." "Malik." Ray gave a faint smile. "Well, Malik, you ever need a job or anything, find me." And with that, Ray turned and walked off into the city traffic, swallowed by taxis and sirens and steel. Malik stood there for a long moment, letting the cold air fill his lungs. He didn't know what would happen next. No job, no plan. But something had shifted. For the first time in a long time, Malik felt like he hadn't just survived the day. He had chosen who he wanted to be. And that made all the difference. The next morning, the city woke up in the same rhythm it always did, sirens echoing off buildings, steam rising from subway grates, cabs honking impatiently as if the entire world were late. Malik stood at the corner of 54th and Lexington, staring at the familiar glass and concrete shell of the garage. The shop looked the same as it had every morning for the last 2 years, like nothing had happened, like he hadn't been cut loose less than 24 hours ago for daring to show a stranger kindness. His duffel bag hung heavy on his shoulder, packed with the essentials: wrenches, torque gauge, a socket set his uncle gave him when he first landed the job, tools that had become an extension of him. He didn't really know why he'd come back this morning. Maybe to pick up the rest of his stuff. Maybe to say goodbye. Maybe just to see it one last time before moving on. But standing there, watching the sun catch the oil-slick shimmer of the pavement, he felt like he was looking through glass at a world he wasn't allowed in anymore. He pushed the door open quietly, half expecting someone to shout at him, tell him he didn't belong here. But the room barely noticed him. Kim was typing behind the desk, chewing gum so loud it popped between every few words of her phone call. The techs were back at their stations, heads down, same banter echoing off the walls. Like yesterday had been erased, like his voice had never risen, like his choice had never been made. He made his way toward the back hallway. No one stopped him. No one even looked up. The locker room was cold and dim, and the same flickering light overhead buzzed with the same tired whine. Malik crouched and opened his locker. The rest of his tools were there, neatly lined in foam trays he had cut himself to fit. He ran his fingers across the metal edges. Each piece had a memory. Tight spots, long nights, that one afternoon when he rebuilt an entire alternator because the replacement hadn't arrived. He started packing slowly. Outside the door, someone laughed. Then another voice answered with something about new rules and cleaning up the place. Malik's shoulders tensed. He knew that tone. They weren't talking about the floor. He zipped the bag shut and sat on the bench for a minute longer than necessary. The weight of everything hit a little harder in that small, quiet space. This place had been more than a job. It had been the promise of something more. Stability, respect, a future. And now it was gone. Because he couldn't keep his mouth shut. Because he'd helped someone who didn't look right. And yet, he didn't feel regret. Just a raw ache of something heavier. The door creaked. Footsteps entered. He didn't look up. "You here to cause more drama?" Karen. Her voice was smug, but not loud, almost cautious. Malik stood, slung the duffel over his shoulder. "Just picking up my things." "Right." Karen crossed her arms. "You could have had a solid future here, kid, if you just learned to follow protocol. You think acting like some social justice hero earns you something?" "I wasn't trying to be a hero." Malik's voice was calm, but there was steel beneath it. "I was trying to be human." Reynolds scoffed. "You millennials think respect is handed out like candy. Newsflash, nobody gives a damn how good your heart is if you can't follow orders." "I followed every order for 2 years," Malik said, stepping forward. "I worked harder than anyone in this place. I stayed quiet, I took the jokes, and you still saw me as disposable." Karen opened her mouth, but Malik walked past her, not waiting for the argument. There was nothing left to say. As he pushed back into the main shop floor, a few heads turned this time, just for a second, just long enough to acknowledge his presence. Or maybe his absence. Kim looked up as he passed the counter. "You forget something?" "No," Malik replied, adjusting his bag. "Just needed to see it one last time." The bell above the door jingled softly as he stepped out into the crisp morning. The city moved around him without pause, people rushing past, clutching coffee cups, barking into phones. Everyone was busy being someone. He walked for blocks with no clear destination, past construction zones, delis and dry cleaners, past corners he and his mom used to wait at when she had just started working nights and he was still in high school, too scared to sleep until she got home. His feet eventually carried him to a park bench across from the hospital, where Ray had said his daughter was. He didn't even know why. Maybe he wanted to make sure the man had made it. Maybe he needed to anchor yesterday in something real. He sat there, elbows on knees, watching taxis unload patients, doctors in scrubs sipping energy drinks, parents juggling bags and fear. His phone buzzed once in his pocket. He pulled it out. A message from Jonas. "They moved someone else into your bay, just so you know." Malik didn't answer. He powered the phone down and slid it back into his pocket. He leaned back, letting the sun find his face, and breathed. The day was colder than he liked, but for the first time in a long while, he didn't feel small. He felt free, untethered. It was terrifying, but it was honest. Somewhere deep inside, a quiet pride stirred. Because in a world that often rewarded cruelty, he had chosen compassion, and even if no one had applauded, even if it cost him his paycheck, his schedule, the rhythm of his life, he had done what he knew was right, and that was worth something. Maybe not to the world, but to himself, and for now, that was enough. By late afternoon, Malik had made peace with the idea that this chapter of his life was over. He hadn't found clarity sitting on that park bench, but something had settled inside him, a steadiness, maybe even a sense of relief. He hadn't just walked out of that garage yesterday. He'd walked away from a version of himself that had been trying too hard to fit into a space that never wanted him in the first place. Still, endings never came without their weight. As he walked home with his duffel bag tugging at his shoulder, his mind ran through the same questions over and over. What now? Where to go next? Who would take a chance on a 20-year-old black mechanic who got fired for talking back? When he reached his apartment building in Harlem, a narrow 5-story walk-up with peeling paint and creaky stairs, he expected to disappear into a long night of searching job boards and eating leftovers with his mom, but instead he found a note taped to his door. His name was scrawled in black marker, and the handwriting was rushed but neat. "Come back to the shop, right now, CEO." Malik stared at it for a moment, half convinced it was a joke. But it wasn't the kind of prank his neighbors would pull, and no one at the garage had that kind of handwriting. His gut tightened, part curiosity, part apprehension. He hesitated just long enough to change his shirt, then grabbed his keys and headed back out, heart thudding with something that felt dangerously close to hope. The sun was dipping below the skyline by the time he reached the garage. From the outside, everything looked as normal as it had that morning. But inside, something had shifted. The lobby lights were brighter, and the energy had changed, quieter, tenser. Mechanics weren't lounging or laughing. They stood clustered near the entrance to the office hallway, whispering in tight circles, eyes darting like they were waiting for something big to drop. Before Malik could ask, the double doors to the conference room opened and a voice called out firm and direct, "Malik Brown, come in." He recognized the voice. Mr. Ellison, the CEO of the entire garage chain. He'd seen him twice before, both times from a distance during site visits when the whole shop was polished up like a showroom. Ellison was a tall, composed man in his 50s, always in pressed slacks and leather shoes that never seemed to touch dust. But today he wasn't wearing a suit. Today, he was in jeans, sleeves rolled, and his face looked like someone who hadn't slept. Malik stepped inside. The room smelled of coffee and tension. At the far end of the table stood Ray, the biker, his leather jacket hanging off the back of a chair, arms crossed, expression unreadable. Malik froze, unsure what this meant, but Ray gave a faint nod. Not a smile, just a gesture that said, "You're good. I got you." Ellison gestured for Malik to take a seat. "You've had quite a week, I hear." Malik sat slowly, his voice cautious. "Didn't expect to be back." Ellison leaned forward, clasping his hands on the table. "Yesterday, a man walked into one of my shops, and most of my staff treated him like a criminal. A threat. They judged him on how he looked, not why he was there. He asked for help and he was ignored. Worse than ignored, he was dismissed." Ray's voice came in low and clear. "Except by him." He glanced toward Ray, then back at Malik. "He's family. My family." Malik frowned, caught off guard. "Wait, what?" Ellison nodded toward Malik. "You were the only one who treated him like a person, and because of that, he made it to the hospital in time to see his daughter come out of surgery. You didn't just fix a bike, you gave a father a chance to be by his kid's side when it mattered most." Malik's throat tightened. He hadn't expected this, any of it. He shifted in his seat, eyes flicking between them. "I wasn't trying to make a statement, He needed help. And you gave it," Ray said simply. "No one else even looked at me. I've seen that before, lived through it. People don't expect kindness from guys who look like me. But you didn't blink, you just acted. There was a long silence before Ellison spoke again. Ray isn't just my brother. He helped me build this company in the early days. Before the suits, before the contracts. He was out there in the cold fixing cars with me long before there were 10 locations and a corporate board. He stepped back years ago, but he still matters to me and to this company. And when I found out how he was treated yesterday, I was furious. Malik's voice was quiet. I lost my job over it. Ellison leaned back. And your manager lost his this morning, effective immediately. Discrimination, whether racial, social, or visual, has no place under this roof. Malik blinked, stunned. Wait, seriously? Ray smiled for the first time, a small, crooked thing full of grit. You paid a price for doing the right thing, time someone else did too. Ellison stood, walking to a small folder on the desk. Malik, I've reviewed your record. Your performance is among the top 5% of every shop we own. You've never had a single formal complaint, and every customer you've touched left happy. That's not common at your age. He slid the folder forward. We're offering you a promotion. Lead technician for this location, pay increase, benefits, a team of your own, and we'll be working with you directly to make sure this shop reflects the values we claim to stand for. Malik stared at the papers, overwhelmed. The room blurred slightly at the edges. For a moment he couldn't speak. Ray broke the silence. I don't wear suits. I don't shake hands unless I mean it. But I meant it when I said what you did mattered. You saw me. And today I wanted to make sure you're seen too. Malik stood slowly, his voice just above a whisper. Thank you. I don't even know what to say. Ellison extended a hand. Say yes. And Malik did. Not with words, but with a grip. Solid, sure, and steady. The kind of grip that said, I'm here. I'm ready. I belong. As he left the room, the other techs parted to let him through. No one laughed, no one whispered. They looked at him differently now. Not because he'd won something, but because he hadn't backed down. Outside, the city had dimmed into twilight. Lights blinked to life across windows like stars waking up early. Malik stepped onto the sidewalk, leather folder in hand, and exhaled. For the first time, he didn't feel like he was surviving. He felt like he was becoming. Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.